It's okay to feel conflicted about this snowstorm.
Like it, but I don't.
It's okay to feel conflicted. Simultaneously amused that people are losing their minds over some snow and cold in Colorado in January, but still wondering about your morning drive tomorrow. Next has you covered. Your forecast, the city's new snowplow policy, and a plea from a plow driver's wife. But other things happened in this state besides snow, like a major announcement from Denver police on the use of force.
We had to change. We had to change some of our policies.
A suggestion on how to overhaul how we issue Amber Alerts, and an honest conversation about how the media covered one aspect of David Puckett's disappearance. Next begins outside your window, where it's cold and snowing in Colorado in January.
Here we go. Moderate snow already falling in the city, complicating the drive tonight. Conditions expected to get much worse overnight. We're under a winter storm warning for heavy snow and bitter cold. I'm meteorologist Kathy Sabin. We are tracking the snow, which has been heavy in the high country all day and will soon become heavy in the city. We're looking at about a 5 to 10 inch accumulation by midday tomorrow downtown by the time this storm winds down. But foothill areas north and west of town could see well over a foot of snow. The other story, temperatures 6 in Denver right now. Factor in the wind chill -14. More moisture coming in. The jet stream pulling in a ton of moisture off the Pacific, and an area of low pressure sliding across the state means winter weather and travel advisories extend across 6 states. Heavy snow in the high country with winter storm warnings posted. Travel not advised. We'll be measuring the snow in feet in the high country by Thursday afternoon. Here along the Front Range, bands of precipitation will create snow rates of about 1 to 2 inches an hour. The heaviest snow falling overnight, and that means the drive tomorrow will be complicated. School delays and closures are expected. Winter storm warning tonight for heavy snow, -4, 5 to 10 inches of snow downtown by the time the storm winds down midday Thursday, with 8 to 16 inches for the foothill areas. 9 is your high tomorrow. Tomorrow night's low, -9 with clearing skies. But look ahead to the upcoming weekend with sunshine, highs back in the 50s.
Starting with this snowstorm, Denver is lowering its standards in the best possible way. No longer will we have to wait for a full foot of snow in the forecast before the city plows residential side streets. Starting today, a mere 6 inches of snow in the forecast will bring out the baby plows, a small fleet of trucks that are dispatched to make single passes down the streets that don't get big plow treatment. The city tells us that 60 drivers will still try to hit every single side street in the city within an 8 to 12-hour shift. Single pass, right down the middle. And the city swears it does not plow the neighborhoods where the fancy people live first. The city's divided up into sectors, and they're all plowed simultaneously. So wait your turn, fancy people. When Denver gets 6 inches of snow now, the baby plows are coming to a street near you. The city's new policy is going to make it tougher for TV news crews to do the obligatory story with people on the street complaining that we all have to wait for a foot of snow before the plows hit the side streets. We do that story like 6 times a winter. Now we might actually be forced to talk to positive people.
Yeah, it needs to be going right when it comes. Yeah. I'd start a new stack. The main roads, you're fine. You turn on those side streets and you got to go real slow.
So I moved here from Dallas, Texas. To me, here in Denver, it's like you may have a few days where it's really cold, or you may have a snowstorm, and then like 3 days later, it could be like in the 50s or 60s.
I think it's necessary, for sure. You got a lot of people parking on those streets.
You know, I ride my bike to work almost every day, you know, year round, and I don't think I've ever seen a plow come through, literally. Plowing would be great. I mean, I always figured they just didn't have the manpower to do it. To hear that, you know, that they might be plowing, you know, yeah, sure, why not?
It's hard out there for a plow, and the plow drivers and their families waiting at home, wondering if the weather, the roads, the other drivers will allow them to come home safe at the end of a long shift. Now, we usually hear on days like this from the CDOT spokespeople, maybe a plow driver. It's about time we heard from a plow driver's wife.
So my husband works for CDOT. It's really important for folks to slow down, to give space for the plows. As I'm sending him up to do a job, it concerns me that he is putting himself at risk, knowing that there are vehicles driving around, cutting him off where he might have to put on his brakes or might have to swerve. It's very disconcerting, because I know that if for some reason, if he's ever in a crash and if he ever, drove into another vehicle or drove off of the road, he would be absolutely devastated. He's up there taking care of the roads so that you can get to where you're going safely.
Here's the reminder that you don't need, but perhaps your neighbor does, to bring in pets tonight from the cold and the snow. Use this as the icebreaker, no pun intended, if you really need to. I mean, just swing by. Tell your neighbor that the news guy with the super ugly jackets would consider it a personal favor if they would bring their dog inside for the night. And if they don't, then my request to you is to call your city's non-emergency line. Be polite, be persistent. You might save a pet's life if they're human, can't be troubled to care. David Puckett will eventually be laid to rest, and there will be a new spot to gather. But for now, that spot is the pond in Olympic Park in Aurora, where David's body was found yesterday, 1 day after the Amber Alert was issued, 3 days after he disappeared. Today, Aurora's police chief and officers laid a wreath at that spot. That's also when they told the public that the confirmation they'd been expecting did come, that the body found was David. In a moment, we'll hear from a father who wants to change the way that Amber Alerts are issued in Colorado. And I'll sit down with the editor of Aurora's newspaper, who really wrestled with the decision of which photo to use to illustrate the heartbreaking end to Aurora's search for David Puckett. Denver police want your input on their new revised use of force policy, whether you think that their order for officers to stop and think, to consider the players involved in an incident, to consider their actions. Denver police want to hear whether you think that that slight delay will save civilian lives or cost officers' lives. Here's the chief's view.
What we've talked about and what we're training our police officers on is not just good enough to be legal when they make actions. We want those actions to be not only legal, but to be necessary, to be appropriate, and to be reasonable.
The police union, PPA, is disappointed, saying today that parts of the new policy have officers anxious and concerned, saying that they're being set up to fail, and that the training needed to really implement this might turn out to be nothing more than just watching a mandatory video. We invite you to really dig into this if you're passionate about this issue. You can read the revised policy as well as the union's response in this story on 9news.com. And right there, you'll find information on how to offer your opinion on the use of force policy. A new federal audit suggesting Colorado's healthcare exchange was spending money like drunken sailors is really unfair to drunken sailors because they spend their own money. Connect for Health Colorado was spending yours. The feds want $10 million back from our state's exchange. The feds pointed to inadequate accounting, conflicts of interest, and bonuses for leadership. Kelly Maher, a Republican strategist who regularly appears right here doing political analysis, she has a conservative group that is highlighting this government audit.
But the fact that the federal government is coming in and telling us that our state exchange misspent $10 million and they want it back, largely on contractors, on consultants, on sweetheart deals, promotion materials. Over $170,000 were spent on performance bonuses for executives with little to no documentation of what the performance actually was that got them that money in the first place. It really becomes a big issue, and this just further erodes people's trust in large government programs.
We got on the phone with a spokesperson for Connect for Health this afternoon who told us that the exchange plans to continue contesting the federal audit's findings, but they told us in the end, quote, if they say we owe them money, then we owe them money. We should note that much of this report criticizes payments that were made before 2014. How many signatures does a letter to the president need to have before the president reads it? 500? 1,000? If the bar is 1,100 or lower for President-elect Donald Trump, then he will see the sentiments signed onto by a DU law professor. Robin Walker Sterling and 1,100 other law professors around America are no fans of Trump's pick for Attorney General Jeff Sessions. Democrats would like you to believe that Sessions is racially insensitive, that he would weaken the Voting Rights Act. Republicans want you to believe that Sessions' record prosecuting KKK members means he's on the up and up. Political analyst Floyd Cerulli wants you to believe that politics are at play here.
The issues that the Attorney General will be called upon to address are far more subtle and far more insidious than just prosecuting someone in a sheet who burns a cross on somebody's lawn.
Democrats are positioning themselves not only to try and slow this down and to cause some political damage to the Republicans, but also they're looking ahead right down to 2018.
So get your popcorn ready for Senator Sessions' confirmation hearing on January 10th. He'll be questioned by his current colleagues in the U.S. Senate, so no way that'll be awkward. Did Colorado's Amber Alert system fail David Puckett? This father thinks so, and he has an idea for the next time a child goes missing.
It makes you draw your breath.
And the editor of Aurora's newspaper talks about the controversial photo they chose to illustrate David's story. Next.
We may never know if an earlier Amber Alert would have saved David Puckett's life, but we do know his case is sparking a conversation about the program, now 14 years old in Colorado. One parent has started a petition to make it easier to issue Amber Alerts. He talked to us outside his work today.
David's story hits quite literally close to home for Matt DeParent. David lived just around the corner from Matt and his 5-year-old son.
What if, like me as a single father, my son's playing out in the front yard, I went in to get water, use the restroom, and somebody snagged my son in that quick amount of time, and I wasn't there to see a car or an individual or none of my neighbors were, you know, why can't we issue an Amber Alert for a child under the age of 12?
So he did something, launched this online petition, already with more than 200 signatures. His petition asked the governor to change the law and allow an immediate Amber Alert for children younger than 10 who go missing.
I think the younger they are, the more concerned we should be.
Part of the reason Amber Alerts have criteria is because authorities want them to remain effective. You have to admit, loosening the criteria to just allow for any missing child might dampen that effectiveness. But Matt doesn't think so.
I think there is people that care, and I think the more we get it out, the better it would be, you know.
Matt is trying to gather 500 signatures on that petition to be delivered to the governor. We want to discuss the process, too. We've invited CBI to come on next and discuss Amber Alerts and their effectiveness, Kyle, so it'll be interesting to get their take.
Sure, and we know that this is a complex issue. Any lever that you pull is going to have another impact and possible consequences, but that's the conversation we want to have.
You don't want people to not respond when there's an Amber Alert, and that's the balance that you have to maintain here.
Sure. Steve, thank you. When David Puckett was pulled from that pond, there were news photographers there. We will not see the majority of those photos because they're too graphic. The Aurora Sentinel newspaper chose one picture showing a body bag containing David being lifted from the pond. We are about to show you that photo as I sit down with Sentinel's editor David Perry to talk about why they chose to use that heartbreaking photo.
Our job as journalists is to help people understand what goes on in their world in the best possible way. But the image themselves conveys that moment of somebody being pulled from the ice that's been looked for a long time. And that type of tragedy is something that people need to understand.
Did you consider whether David's mother would see the photo and how she might react? Did that play at all into your decision?
That's the first thing we think of, and any human does, any parent does, is what would the parents think having to see this? We don't want to inflict that pain, and we think about that, you know, what would that parent feel? But we don't produce news just for one single person, that this was a very public event, the search was a very public event, and the ending was a very public event too.
What was the most cogent criticism you heard?
That we don't realize the pain we inflict on the family members. And that's, I think, a misunderstanding, that we do understand that we make that decision not willingly and not easily, but we make that decision on purpose. We're just the eyes and the ears of the public, and we want to show you, here's what's happening in your world, even when your world falls apart.
Next, a viewer wondering if we aren't all part of some local news conspiracy. No, it's a serious question. We'll give it a serious answer. It is seriously cold in Colorado tonight, but not like out of this world cold, or so we're told. Our next question comes from a viewer named Corky, who writes, "Hey, Next. I've often wondered, is there a guy or gal sitting in some dark room in one of your studios that has the job of making sure that all 3 or 4 major news channels run the same stories at about the same time and make darn sure that all the stations go to commercial at the same time?" Those are fair questions, Corky. So as for the commercials, TV news stations slot commercials based on research on when you'll keep watching. That is literally not my department, but it does kind of make sense the stations would come to similar conclusions on when to go to break. So now as for running the same stories at the same time, Corky, here's the deal. That is the last thing that Next wants to do. If we are covering the same stories in the same way as the other stations in town, why on earth would you be watching us? We're trying to do the opposite. Winter is here. If you are looking for fresh perspective, perhaps you don't need a view that's more worldly, but more otherworldly. And we found that view inside the warm and toasty Denver Arts Museum.
Right now, Colorado feels a little bit like Hoth, the ice planet from The Empire Strikes Back. But yeah, I think a lot of those characters would be comfortable right here. My name is Stefania Van Dyke, and I'm the interpretive specialist for Star Wars and the Power of Costume. With the cold weather, Chewie's going to be just fine. It doesn't get as cold in Denver as it gets on Hoth, or where Starkiller Base is either. So I think Han Solo is safe with his jacket, and Chewie will be fine with his fur coat. Princess Leia's slave bikini when she was Jabba the Hutt's slave in his palace. Princess Leia would not be skiing in the mountains this weekend in Denver, or outside of Denver. She would enjoy the summer here though. It's nice and toasty. It's sitting poolside, maybe with a cocktail. This snowtrooper is going to have a blast in the mountains this weekend. He's going to go skiing. And this guy is outfitted completely in like a quilted undersuit, all insulated. He's got really warm boots, insulated gloves. So we could all kind of take a cue from the snowtrooper right now in Denver. It's cold in Denver right now. It's really cold and in the mountains, but don't cut open your tauntaun quite yet. You don't need to crawl in your tauntaun. It's not quite as cold as Hoth.
Steve, I've never seen Star Wars. Was that funny?
I thought they smelled bad from the outside.
All right, that's a Star Wars joke, everybody. Steve's my Star Wars interpreter. So a bunch of the co-workers here have visited the Denver Art Museum's Star Wars Power of Costume exhibit. To a person, they have come back impressed. I think you should check it out. It runs through April 2nd. The most Colorado thing we saw today is actually a couple of people who have chosen what they call a Colorado way of living here and around our country. 2 years ago, Peter and Kathy Holcomb sold their home in Boulder, traded it for a life on the road. They run their photography business, and they're raising their 12-year-old daughter from an RV. So far, they've traveled to 49 states and explored 40 of the 58 national parks, but yet the road keeps bringing them home.
We moved to Colorado as soon as we got out of college to go climbing and kayaking. And we have really taken that lifestyle to the extreme, and we try to do those things every single day.
They've also been able to work along the way. Their daughter does school online. Okay, that's a fantastic classroom there. And Kathy wants to remind everybody, just because you have kids does not mean that the adventure has to stop. We are back with a sign suggesting some fuzzy math in one Colorado town.
I'm no hero. I play a game. I'm nothing more than a distraction a few months a year. Nothing more. It's too easy to overlook the real heroes, the ones who often sacrifice much and on occasion sacrificed everything. Those who have stood up and defended our country. They're the only reason I get to wake up every day and do what I love. It's time we return the title of hero to those who have earned it and have often paid dearly for it. You know whose autograph you ought to be asking for? Meet a real hero. Take time to get to know a veteran or someone serving and tell them thanks. They're the real heroes. Let's respect the ones who deserve it.
It's a sign from Gold Hill, northwest of Boulder. Established 1859, elevation 8,463 feet, population 118, total 10,440. We see you, Gold Hill, in your math. Carol Lynch sent it in writing, favorite sign in Colorado, really captures the spirit of the town. Whether you're watching from a couch or wearing one, we'll see you next time.